In the jQuery section, we covered variables. Let's recap. A variable stores a piece of code or a string in a variable. This is useful when you want to repeat that code several times but do not want to type it repeatedly, or when you want to make your code easier to read. Setting up a variable is pretty straightforward. We start with var, which stands for variable. This is called a keyword. Next, we give it a name. Let's say my city. And my city equals quotes Amsterdam and a semicolon. And hit enter. Now when I type my city, it shows Amsterdam. Now we can also do this with code. Again, we start with the keyword var. And let's say the name is header text. And the variable header text equals the text in this header. So again, we need document dot query selector. And now we need a unique selector for this header, which is this class. And the h2. Let's clear this. Dot class and h2. And next we want the text. So dot text content. And that's all we need. We can close it with a semicolon. And hit enter. Now when we type header text here, we get the text from this header, which is stored in this variable. So a variable stores a piece of code or a string, and this is the start of selecting multiple elements on a page using JavaScript. Next, we need a for loop. This allows you to run a code repeatedly with a slight change each time. Let's set it up. We start with the command for. Next, we need to add information for our for loop. First, we need, of course, parentheses. And we start by creating a counter variable. This counts each time we go through the loop. The standard letter used for counting is the I. And we set it to 0. And we add a semicolon. This time, it is not the end of the line. So we continue. So we have the for command, and we set a variable that counts the times we go through the loop, and it starts at 0. Next, we have to state how often we go through the loop. If we want 10 times, we keep going as long as I is smaller than 10. Again, we add a semicolon. And finally, we must state what happens with I after completing a loop. When we want I to be 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10, we want to add a 1 to the I each time a loop is completed. The standard way to do is I equals I plus 1. So I starts at 0. After completing the first loop, 1 is added. So it becomes 1. And after completing the second loop, 1 is added, so it becomes 2. As I equals I plus 1 is used a lot in loops, there's a shorter way to write the code. And this is simply I plus plus. So this is our loop. It starts with the for command. Next, we have a counter variable I, and the loop keeps going as long as I is less than 10. And after each loop, 1 is added to the I. Next, we need instructions, what will happen each time the loop takes place. And we do so with curly brackets. So we start with the opening curly bracket and go to the next line using Shift Enter. And for now, we will console log the value of I. If you skipped the jQuery chapter, console log displays text in the console of your web developer tools, where we are working now. So console log I should show 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. as it goes through this loop. Now we need a semicolon and a closing curly bracket. And let's have a look. And there we have it. We have a console log for 0 all the way to 9. Now let's clear this and reuse the code. Now what do you think will happen if I change this to a 2 and this to 8? Let's hit enter and find out. So now it starts with the 2 and it ends at 7. Instead of a variable, a var, you might also see const when you search for examples online. Const means a constant variable that cannot be changed. So while const will work for selecting your elements, it will not work in a for loop, as the I changes from 0 to 1, 2, etc. For your A/B tests, you can simply use a var for selecting elements and for your for loops. Just keep in mind that when you search for examples online, you might see a constant variable. Let's quickly recap. A variable stores a piece of code or a string in a variable. To create a for loop, we start with the for command and we set a variable that counts the times we go through the loop. Next, we have to state how often we go through the loop. And finally, we must state what happens with the variable, in this case I, after completing a loop, where I++ means 1 is added. Don't forget to use the semicolons. With that in mind, let's check out how to select multiple elements on the page using JavaScript.